Okay, just want to remind people, try and keep your mute on most of the time. I don't mind being interrupted in my talk. Go ahead and, unmute and ask your question. I don't mind getting interrupted, but I'll just keep going if I don't hear from you. And so I'm Mandy, and I work at the Auke Laboratories in Juneau. I'm a fisheries biologist. I've done lots of Exxon Valdez oil spill research over the years, and nearshore ecology is kind of my passion and my thing, specifically seaweeds. And so I finally got my act together and put together a field guide, which I thought was something we really needed. I kept looking for a decent one, couldn't find one I liked, and instead of complaining about it, I finally decided I should do something and actually get this field guide done. So I'm going to give you a quick little outline here of the talk. It'll just give you kind of an overview of what are seaweeds, give you a tour of the field guide, and I think a lot of you have seen it. I'm going to just toggle off for a minute. I have a copy right here. Everybody can see it. It's a ring-bound field guide. I see some people already have it. I was just informed that it's all sold out now. So there's some still in some bookstores, but Alaskan Seagrasses has no more copies. So you'll have to snag one if you can until we do another second printing, which might come sooner than later, which is a nice surprise. So also, and then a little bit about seaweed ecology and some of the web resources out there for learning more about seaweeds. So seaweeds, who cares? Why are they important? They're a very important marine resource to a lot of different marine species. They provide habitat and forage. And I'd also just like to point out that even non-marine species use seaweeds. Deer come down in the winter in the heavy snow months where they can't get food, and they'll feed on the seaweeds. And I've even seen brown bear eat seaweeds. They really like to in the spring when they come out of hibernation. Sometimes the plumbing's not working quite right, and the seaweeds kind of help grease the pipes, so to speak. So a lot of different organisms and species out there rely on seaweeds. Here's another example. This is an aerial shot here by Juneau out at Berners Bay of the herring coming in and spawning in the intertidal zone right on the seaweeds. This is what it looks like up close, the herring roe right on the seaweeds. It's a really popular subsistence item, good eating, good nutrition, and so it's very important not only for the herring but also people. People like seaweeds a lot. There's lots of commercial products out there. There's seaweed salads and soups and sushi. Everybody's familiar with those. There's a lot of extracts of seaweeds, those kinds of products out there, fertilizer, soaps, cosmetics, and it's even used in ice cream to keep ice cream nice and smooth. There's an Alaskan product there, the kelp marmalade. You'll see that in some of the grocery stores. I've seen it in all over the state, in Juneau and Anchorage for sure, and Sitka. And I haven't seen those seaweed flavored Pringles though. I'd like to get my hands on those. If anybody goes to Asia, bring me back some. That would be pretty cool. So there's a lot of those commercial products, and I just saw them the other day in Costco. I screamed in Costco. I was so excited, I couldn't believe it. And half the rack was gone an hour later, so folks are really excited about seeing that in Costco. I think when seaweeds make it into Costco, it means all is well in the universe. We'll be okay. So that's huge. So what are seaweeds? Well, I want to clarify a few things. They're not that stuff you see growing on your roof. That is moss. I've been asked that question many times, but it is not seaweed, it is moss. It's not algae. We get a lot of that in Juneau and Southeast. But algae, that's the plural name. Alga is the singular name. But they're actually aquatic photosynthetic organisms. They can be one cell or many cells thick. They lack the specialized tissues you would see in vascular plants on land. And they don't have those. They don't need them because they're already in the water. They don't need to suck water out of the ground or anything. So they're a little simpler design. And many of you may have experienced microalgae if you have a fish tank at home and gotten that pea soup look. That's an algae. It's a single cell organism that can make your life miserable for your little aquarium. There's also the red tide blooms. Those people are familiar with. They get that red look. That's a microalgae. It's actually a phytoplankton dinoflagellate, and they can be toxic. Just because it's red doesn't mean it's toxic. The color really has nothing to do with it. It's about the toxins that the particular species produces. So in order to figure out if it's a bad red tide, you have to actually sample it, look at the species, find out what kind of toxins they produce. So those are the little guys. Seaweeds are known as macroalgae, or also called benthic marine algae. They're big. You can see most of them with the naked eye. This is a nice photo of kelps, and there's no missing them. They're in the marine environment. And a little saying I like to have out there is all seaweeds are algae, but not all algae are seaweeds. The study of algae is called phycology, not to be confused by psychology, although I often get asked to talk at psychology meetings by accident. But it's a different profession. There's psychology and then there's phycology. Although there are many phycologists that I might recommend getting some professional help. But not me. But just want to clarify, I am a phycologist. So I want to keep this simple about seaweeds. They can be kind of challenging, but there are three main groups of seaweeds, or what we call phyla, and these are based on their color, the pigments they use to photosynthesize in the marine environment. So there's just three groups: a green group, a brown group, that includes the kelps, and reds, the red seaweeds. Basic seaweed anatomy, it's not terribly different from regular plants, but phycologists want to be special and have their own names for everything, so they've renamed some structures. The basic parts of the plant that we talk about a lot are the holdfast down here at the bottom. It helps it attach to the rock, and it has a stipe right after that that gets up to a blade. That blade can have a midrib or multiple midribs going up the middle. And this whole plant structure, we don't call it a plant, we call it a thallus. So those are the basic parts. How the plants branch, just like terrestrial plants, is important. Looking at the branching patterns. Are they opposite? Are they alternating? These patterns are important to note when you're trying to identify species. And the way we collect seaweeds, the phycologists study and preserve them. We press them just like plants. We use a plant press, but the process is a little different. It's a wet mount process where we actually float out the seaweed specimen in a tray of seawater, and we submerge the herbarium paper underneath it and then lift up the paper and tease out the branching structures onto the really wet paper, and then drip off the water and make sure that the important taxonomic structures are visible for the preserved pressed specimen. So these are some examples that I've digitized and scanned in right from the herbarium, and they preserve very well. They don't like UV light. UV light will fade them, but if you keep them in the dark, they'll be fine. Or you can scan them and then print them, and then they'll not be sensitive to the UV light. But preserving them this way is, we can go back to the specimen and we can rehydrate it and put it under the microscope and look at the cellular structures. So it's a great way to preserve them. And also what I like about it is it's a great artistic form. Some of the pressings I've seen in some of the herbariums have just been absolutely gorgeous. So they're really fun to look through. So I'm just going to go through now and show you, kind of give you the cliff notes on how to go through my field guide and start learning some of your seaweeds. It's a true field guide. It's on water-resistant paper. It's not waterproof, so you can't dunk it in a tide pool. It probably won't survive that very well, but rainy weather, drops of water, it'll be fine. It's meant to take on the beach with you. It's ring-bound. And it's, got pictures of what the seaweeds look like right on the beach to try and help with quick identification. So it's the ground zero for the book are these quick keys, and I've laid out things in the three colors that we talked about: the green seaweeds, the browns, and the reds, and then also within those colors the different morphologies, the different types of shapes in seaweeds that you see. You'll have green blades, green tubes, branched greens. Same thing with the reds. You'll have bladed reds and saccate reds, tubes, all of those different forms, and those will help you jump to the section in the book that has all the seaweeds of that similar form and color. Here's an example of one of the pages, and you can see I've got at the top margin, it's a red color for the red group of seaweeds, and I've also got it in the group of seaweeds here that's the thick red blades. And you can see I have two different species on these pages. I've put similar species together so you can quickly try and tell the difference between them. This one has a very thick red blade, another one that's not quite as red or irregular shaped. And you can see what it looks like right on the beach. You can see the taxonomic information on the left. I also have a pressing there from my herbarium of that specimen, what it looks like when it's dried. And those are handy because it shows you the whole thallus or the whole plant and what it looks like, because sometimes the photos don't show you everything cleanly. And I always recommend there's a similar to section right at the base of at the bottom of these narratives saying to cross-reference other species. I really recommend you cross-reference other species. Sometimes we're very confident in what we see, and it can be, there's a lot of seaweeds that are sneaky and are actually something else. And so I know there's a lot of species in this book. It can get overwhelming. I'm just going to go through a dozen or so of the most common ones that if any of you folks went to the beach, you should be able to see these right away and be confident in their IDs. This is starting with the green seaweeds, and this is sea lettuce. This is probably the most common seaweed out there, and if we learn any seaweeds at school, this is probably the most common one that teachers like to teach the kids. Sea lettuce is easy to remember. It's a bladed green, but I just want to point out that there are actually quite a few other bladed greens out there, so please cross-reference those. But this one's in all kinds of different habitats. We have no problem finding it. In the brown seaweeds, this is the rockweed. This is the most common seaweed in Alaska. It's everywhere. This one is truly a weed. It acts like a weed. It's everywhere. It can dominate beaches. It's designed to reseed other beaches. Those inflated parts of the plant there, when it breaks off, it can float in the water. It can float off to another beach and then drop eggs there and will reseed that beach. So I call this the dandelion of the sea because it truly is just like the dandelions. You can go to the remote, very, very remote places and find a dandelion. Well, it's just as true. Any remote beach, you will find fucus. So this one's an easy one to remember. Some of the kelps here, this is an understory kelp, sugar kelp, Saccharina latissima. If you actually go in the store, you will see the commercial name is kombu. And this is often used for soup stocks and seasonings and nutrients to help with the soups. It's a very common commercial one, and it's very common also all over the Gulf of Alaska. Another kelp, this is the ribbon kelp, and it has a big midrib down the middle. And it has a commercial name of wakame, also used for soups and stocks and flavorings in stews. Very popular commercial one also. And it's called Alaria marginata. And it's in the lower intertidal. If you have a low tide, you should be able to see it in the mussel and barnacle zone. And now this is bull kelp. This is a canopy forming kelp, meaning that it grows all the way up to the surface of the water in the near shore. You can see it. We have 3 canopy kelps in Alaska. So I'm just going to go through these 3. This one is pretty common, and it's very common down south. Neuricystis is this genus name, and it's commonly used for, you may be familiar with pickled kelp. This one's the very popular one to use that. They just take those round stipes and just chop them up like a cucumber and make pickled kelp with those. So this is very common all over. The other one is the giant kelp, Macrocystis pyrifera. This is common up and down the coast in the northern and southern hemisphere. It's most famous, I think, off the California coast for those huge beds that you see offshore there. It likes the exposed water and the ground swells. In Alaska, we have it outside and southeast on the outside coast, especially off of Sitka. You'll also see a little bit of it in Afognak. There's some patches there. But it doesn't like the cold water, and it needs the stable salinity, so that's why, and exposure. So it doesn't like to go way far north, but it does pretty well in Sitka and Kodiak. And this is a true perennial. It gets kind of beat up in the winter, but it's there year-round and provides a lot of good habitat in the near shore for other species. This is the 3rd canopy forming kelp. This is my favorite one, and if you remember any seaweed from my whole talk today, this is the one. I will test you at the end, and everybody better remember dragon kelp. How can you not remember that name? It's easy. It's cool. Dragon kelp. This is one that Alaskans need to have ownership with. This is unique to Alaskan waters. It does not occur south of southeast Alaska. It occurs all the way up north and is in the Aleutians. It's the only canopy forming kelp in the Aleutians. The other 2 species don't occur there. It's a very fast growing kelp. It can get 100 feet or more. And it's more of an annual type kelp. It'll die back. You won't see it sometimes in the winter, but it grows very fast in the summer, and has these little sausage air bladders in the midrib. You can see in this pressing here, there's these little digits here. These are all little sausage-link air bladders, and that helps the blade float up all the way up to the surface so it can photosynthesize. So anyway, this is our state canopy kelp, and I am nominating it for our state seaweed. I think it should be. So if anybody has any influence with the state government, and we need to get this on the agenda and get it passed so that we have state flowers. Why can't we have a state seaweed? I think this would be very appropriate. So anyway, remember this one. I'm going to test you. Okay, I'm going to move on to just a few of the reds. There's a lot of red seaweeds. There's more reds than in the other two groups. So I can't go over them all, but these are the ones that are interesting and common. This is the group of seaweeds known as the Porphyras, the commercial name Nori. It's one you see when you have sushi on the outside. And I know I'm saying red, and you're thinking sushi, I see green. But it dries kind of black or green. But when it's alive out on the beach, it's a red color. And it's very thin. It's a red blade. It's only 1 or 2 cells thick. And it kind of is like saran wrap or cellophane. And it's a little rubbery. And this one is, I always tell everybody, if you're going to eat anything on the beach or you're in a survival situation, this is the one you want to find. It grows high up on the beach and in the middle intertidal and the low intertidal. Many different species. We have like 20 different ones in Alaska. They're all highly nutritious, have the most vitamins and minerals and nutrition of any seaweed on the beach. So you find this one, you can maximize your effort with just getting this stuff. And super high in vitamin C and D, which, you know, if you're trying to stave off scurvy, this is the one. This will help. Here's another group of red blades. They're really thick. They're called the palmarias, and commercially they're known as dulse. And these I kind of call, they're kind of like fruit leather. They're a little thicker, more rigid, kind of the sea fruit leather is the way I like to think of them. And they're beautiful and very striking, and also nutritious, but not as much as the noris. And I also want to point out a group that is called the coralline algae, which is a little bit of a oxymoron because it's not a coral, it's an algae, but it can look like corals. It's actually seaweeds that secrete a calcium carbonate exoskeleton to protect them, so they have an armoring, and this is a crustose form of them on this rock. And we actually have these all over Alaska. It's very common, and people think of it as a coral, but it is actually an algae. And here's another example of corallines. And okay, they do look like corals here, but it's an algae. And you can find these in tide pools and also out on more exposed coastlines, but they're just beautiful. And they dry, when they're alive, they're pink, and they'll dry white. They'll get bleached white. And that's a really interesting group of red seaweeds. And at the back of the book, I put in a couple bonus sections, just so people were aware there's some other cool things out there. The seagrasses are commonly seen on the beach, and in Alaska we have 3 different kinds. We have eelgrass, which is called zostra. That's one you'll see commonly in estuarine and protected habitats, near salmon streams, inside waters, highly productive areas. It's a well-studied habitat, and eelgrasses. Surf grasses is another one. So often people don't realize the difference between eelgrass and surf grass. And surf grass likes harder substrates. It likes bedrock boulder habitats and more exposed areas. It really likes the surf and the pounding. It's a pretty tough plant. And we have 2 different species of that in Alaska, the serrata and schooleri. But if you think seaweeds are hard to identify, the seagrasses are even harder. So, I'm not very good at IDing those. You really need to find the little flowers. This photo down at the bottom shows a flowering specimen, and you need to wait until those flowers mature later in the summer to really positively ID these and look at all of the root stems, and there's a lot of different iterations for IDing those. Also, I wanted to put on folks' radar something that we look at probably every day and don't realize what we're looking at. These are marine lichens. They are in the intertidal and very striking. There's a white seaside lichen. This upper panel up here, the white up here is, it really likes to grow on granite. It looks like chalk. So, you know, it's just so continuous that you just think, oh, it's a white rock. But there's actually, in the spray zone, it's a marine lichen. And then the black sea lichen is just all over beaches in Alaska. You see it everywhere. It looks like tar, often called the tar line by people. But it's a really striking marine lichen. It's up in the upper tidal zone, the spray zone. It's indicative of where high tide is. And when I did the oil spill research during the spill, when they were doing cleanups in Prince William Sound, they thought it was oil. And I watched them hot water, high pressure hose this stuff on the rocks for days trying to get it off. And the problem is these lichens, you know, they grow subcutaneously in the undersurface of the rock. And so it's very difficult to actually thoroughly kill it. But it is often mistaken for oil, and it's not. So I want everybody to have that awareness. And if you go to the beach, you can see it's a very distinct line. There's also orange seaside lichens, and these also you'll see in rookeries. They really like guano from birds or sea lions. And sea cliffs, you'll see these beautiful orange cliffs, and there's a complex of several different orange lichens on those, and you'll see those in the spray zone also. So now I'm going to kind of shift and kind of talk about some basic seaweed ecology concepts, because the taxonomy can get overwhelming trying to remember all of these species, and there's some basic ecology rules that I can give you, and keys to how to understand what's going on with the beach. And you don't have to know all the species, but you can still understand the habitat and the seaweeds there. Hopefully also, you know, next time you go to the beach, you'll look at it a little differently. You can start saying, I wonder why this is here, or why is this making this pattern? So this here is a photo on the outside coast in southeast Alaska. It's, you know, a nice curved bay with all this sand, and, you know, magazines and Hollywood have all brainwashed us to think this is the ultimate beach. And I would argue that this is the most boring beach I have ever seen. Look, where is all the marine life? Where is the biology? It's a sandy beach. It's sterile. There's nothing there. There is some salt marsh up at the top, but this is boring, and it's all that sand, that fine sand that gets moved around. Nothing can settle out on it. This is not the perfect beach in my mind. So what I want to point out is seaweeds have, this is also in the field guide, but seaweeds have all evolved to specialize in different parts of the beach, and they form these bands, and it's almost like a barcode. And all these species have evolved over time to outcompete other species for a specific niche in the vertical tide window. So the tides are what really determined this over the years. And so if you're in the upper intertidal and the high intertidal, you can be out of the water for a long time. You have the tools to get dried up and get overheated or get frozen. You can handle all those extremes very well out of the water. As you move down the beach, you're going to be underwater more than you are out of the water until you get right down to that lower intertidal, and you're mostly underwater all year round, except for some of the big spring tides, low minus tides, where you're exposed. But you're not going to have as good a tools to deal with those extremes, so it's a little more stressful during those times for them. So all these species have competed with each other and evolved to specialize in these different zones. And so we get these patterns that are really striking, that you can see even from offshore. So here's an example of a beach in southeast. And as you can see, substrate will influence the seaweeds and how they form these bands in the intertidal zone. And I mean, if this doesn't look like a barcode, I mean, this is the biological barcode here. It's just telling me so much information. And these are really predictable. I can tell you a lot of the species assemblages associated with each one of those seaweed bands, and they'll be pretty accurate. And these bands are getting kind of wider because we have this cobble beach and a gentle slope, and so it's really magnified those bands and shows them very well. Here's a banding pattern. It's influenced by the energy. This is one out in Sitka Sound, high energy. Look what's happened with that marine lichen band on those cliffs. It's really wide. It's dark. It's extremely wide. You could tell the spray zone is making it all the way up this cliff. So a really high energy beach. And then below that, a couple really narrow bands there, and those are some barnacles that can hold on there where it really gets pounded. And then as you get lower, where they're underwater most of the time, you can see there's some kelps and maybe some red seaweeds that are just hanging on. But that's a harsh environment, so it's really changed that barcoding. But I can tell, the biology is telling me all about the energy on that beach. This is an example of how biology reflects the exposure that it's experiencing. I love this photo. It's like, I call this my yin and yang photo, because it's telling me that on the left shore here, there's a lot more exposure, a bigger fetch. We've got the rockweed growing and kelps. We've got some bedrock here that's pretty stable. And then you turn the corner here and look, the biology is totally changing. What's going on? Now we're getting erosional depositional type thing. We're getting finer sediments. We're getting eelgrass growing in here. We're getting some other little seaweed patches in here, but a totally different community, telling me that it's in a protected, finer sediment area. It doesn't get a lot of big waves. And so just a little change in exposure and aspect. The biology is very sensitive to it. Seaweeds are also, will tell you about the salinity in an environment. This is a stream delta. It's very patchy. You've got some patchy rockweed there and some greens. And these seaweeds are very tolerant of fresh water. They don't really mind. You don't have as many species here, but definitely the ones that can take advantage of low salinity environments are in this habitat. So salinity is a big issue. And also temperature, cold water versus warmer waters. I mentioned it a little bit with some of the canopy kelps. But our most important canopy kelp that we're taking ownership of is dragon kelp. Another reason for dragon kelp take ownership is because it is a cold water adapted species. It actually needs these cold temperatures to reproduce and be successful. The other species don't do as well in that. So as we're experiencing, climate change, this is something we'll keep our eyes on, because some of these cold waters may not be as prevalent in Alaska, and it might impact the distribution of this species. So a lot of seaweeds are adapted to specific temperatures. Another thing that affects seaweeds are grazers. These are not my friends. Grazers eat algae, and I came along this perfectly good patch of sea lettuce and this limpet is having a smorgasbord right in front of me. It's grazing a superhighway through this patch of seaweed. So, and you're like, it's just a limpet, give it a break, right? It's okay, let it eat. Well, it can have an impact on how seaweeds are distributed on the beach. Maybe not a limpet, but here's an example of urchins. And this is a urchin barrens, and these urchins graze heavily on kelp beds and can dramatically change how beaches look and how the seaweeds are distributed. If you look carefully here, all these little red dots, these are all urchins, especially right in here. They're just marching right up this slope and just mowing down the kelp beds here. There's some juvenile Marcystis bull kelp here. They're next on the menu. So they can really dramatically change the nearshore environment. So it is significant. So what is my perfect beach? Well, this is one. Look at that. There's no grazers, there's no urchins, there's a beautiful canopy kelp bed of dragon kelp, and there's red seaweeds, and, you know, grazer-free environment. That's what it's all about. So, you know, I think we should change the way we think about what is your perfect beach. Mm-hmm. And so I thought I would just go on and show you some more aerial photos of some of the shorelines in Alaska, just to challenge our brains about what we just learned about seaweed ecology. This one here is in Lynn Canal in southeast Alaska. This is a classic pattern that you'll see in fjords. As you get farther in fjords, you get this real dominant band of the Pacific blue mussel, big and wide. And you get that because there's a lot of freshwater influence, and a lot of the sea stars and predators on mussels can't survive those environments, and so the mussels go unchecked. And we have that winged or ribbon kelp here in the bottom, and it's laying over some of that coral and algae I mentioned. It's just making a beautiful pattern there. So this is classic for southeast Alaska. Here's another one in southeast. This is in Dundas Bay. What is going on here? What kind of pattern is that? That's that orange band is that rockweed, the fucus. It's so common, but it's just forming a narrow line in the middle of the intertidal. It's a perennial. It can grow for about 3 to 5 years. So what that tells me is that middle zone has had no disturbance for 3 to 5 years, but below it has been very disturbed, and above it has been disturbed. Dundas is over by Glacier Bay. It probably gets a lot of ice scour. Fucus is very tolerant of disturbance and ice scour. It can survive it, but some of the other seaweeds can't. So you get this unusual pattern. It's just a pencil line right in the middle of the intertidal. Now we move a little bit farther north, up to the Copper River Delta. We have a lot of mud, but there's salt marsh vegetation, also can show patterns in its habitat. This is a mixture of sedges and willows and berries. And so they even make a pattern way up high in the salt marsh habitats. Here's Prince William Sound. This is a plunge plume, a big avalanche, but I thought it was very interesting because, again, the vegetation is showing the patterns, tracking the contour there, showing you the big bands of fucus, and we again have some dune grass up high. There's some other plants up there that are patchy, and then a nice good band of kelps, those laminarians or the sugar kelp there. Definitely just tracking that whole substrate and what the substrate's doing. Another example in Prince William Sound of a kind of gravelly stream delta where you got fucus, and then the beautiful eelgrass down by the zero tide line, a very lush habitat there. So it's kind of just two bands for that freshwater influence there, but still very striking. Here's a bedrock, sheltered rocky type habitat in Prince William Sound. Again, you see that marine lichen with the pencil line way up high, and then some of the rockweed, some of the reds and green seaweeds, and then the kelps. And so that pillow basalt that's very common up there really makes good barcodes or banding of the seaweeds there. Nice stable substrate, really lush vegetated shoreline. We go up to Cook Inlet. Most people don't really think of Cook Inlet as, you know, kind of a big muddy place, but there are parts of it that are incredibly productive, incredibly lush. A lot of these reefs that go miles and miles offshore with lots of kelps and red seaweeds, really lush habitat, really productive habitat that goes on for acres and acres. Here's more of upper Cook Inlet and more of the salt marsh habitat. Again, you can see in the foreground some different, here's some salt damaged sedges, some really healthy sedges here, and then a different species of sedge coming up here, lighter color green. There's some more iron deposits there that's creating a big band back here for standing water areas, but very different patterns. Not much seaweed can handle that really muddy freshwater environment, so it's mostly salt marsh type vegetation. You jump over to Kodiak. This is an aerial shot of some of those bull kelp beds, the Nori cystis. Can just totally 100% cover, create acres and acres right in the near shore. Lots of habitat, hugely productive area. Here's a pretty exposed coastline, high energy beach off of Kodiak. And I don't know if you can see it, but back here in the back there's this huge mussel bed that's just scattered all over the tops of these boulders. And then we've got some seaweeds here, and this seaweed you can't really tell, and I didn't talk about it, but it's and this one here down at the bottom is a species that's one that you only see at certain exposures and salinities, and it's indicative of very exposed habitats. You rarely see it, and so I was very excited to see it here. And then that pink is the corallines, the one that looked all coralline and articulated. It was beautiful. That's some of the most dense beds of that I've ever seen, these huge monocultures of it, which are very unique on those outside coastlines. So that was kind of the tour of some of the coastal areas in the Gulf. Web resources for seaweeds. This is my website for seaweedsofalaska.com. A lot of the things that are in the book are also here, and some additional photos. If the species names change, I'll update them here. And phycologists can never agree on a name, so they're always changing. So I need to give this website an update because there have been some that have changed. But you can see I've organized it by the three colors, greens, browns, and reds. There's a taxonomic tree. I've got some other miscellaneous things up there, some of those habitats I showed you. But you can just go in here and do a search for something if you know the common name or scientific name. But here, if I clicked on the brown seaweeds, it would get you to this summary page of all the brown seaweeds with little thumbnails of their pressings and their names, so you can scroll through those and just picture key them. If you click on one of them, I'm going to go to the bull kelp. It's going to bring up a taxa page for you. You can see the photo of the bull kelp, the same information you would see in the book here for its life history. Additional thumbnails here of photos, some of the reproductive parts. So there's more there than there is in the book sometimes. I need to add to it, but I haven't lately. There's also a little icon I wanted to point out here, which is Algae Base. That is the global international official algae database where you can look up all things algae and seaweed. If we clicked on that, it'll take you right to the same species page on their database, the bull kelp, the Nori cystis. And then there's more photos and more phylogeny than you'll ever want to know. Even for me, it's a little much, but it's all there, and that's a resource that's good to go to. Also, I just wanted to mention a lot of these aerial photos that I've shown here and some of the ground photos of the seaweeds that I used for the book was all part of a coastal mapping project that I've been involved in for almost 10 years. And we have a website, shorezone.org, that's being hosted by the Nature Conservancy. The actual desktop database is run by NOAA, and it's right here in Juneau. And I just did a screen capture of that database, which shows this is Mount Augustine and Cook Inlet and our track line. You can actually pull up video and fly along that coastline, or some of the still images are also available up there. And you can, you know, if you're a real techie and Uber user, you can go up there and make your own habitat maps, you know, and say, I want to have a map of all eelgrass in Cook Inlet, and, you know, download that into a shapefile, use it for your own desktop project, GIS project. So there's all kinds of levels of information there, but the imagery is the most popular part people like to use and use it for. Even the Coast Guard uses it when they're doing emergency response, vessels in distress, lots of different users for this site. But that's why I have so many aerial images, because I'm the flying biologist and I'm required to take the pictures and identify the seaweeds from the air, you know, several hundred feet up going 80 miles an hour, which is kind of, I think, a form of torture for a phycologist, because I want to be down on the beach, you know, touch and feel. So I get frustrated, but it's a great reality check for me to look at the intertidal and nearshore habitat at a different scale. And so just to kind of close out, Alaska has been an incredible place for me to study seaweeds. For me, it truly is the last frontier. I was fortunate enough to do several surveys out in the Aleutians and ended up with over 900 specimens. And just in that collection, I had 52 new distribution records for species that no one even knew occurred in the Aleutians. I had at least 150 to 200 species in that collection, 16 of which are probably never, they've never been seen before, they haven't been described, and probably half of those are only found in the Aleutians, unique to that habitat, nowhere else in the world. So, you know, the geek factor is off the charts here. I'm just saying. You know, that was, you know, a little sensory overload for me. And probably the biggest finding of that survey was this kelp. It's on the front of the field guide, if you didn't already notice. And this was, to me, you know, a glaring thing that was so different from anything I'd ever seen. I knew right away it was something new. It's almost 9 feet long. It's only found in a very small group of the Aleutians. And when we finally worked it up and got some genetics information back to it, it turns out that it's hugely significant. It's probably one of the founding father species of all the other kelps in the Gulf, in the North Pacific. It's probably the founding species for all those laminarians and also for all of the Alaria families. So there's 2 big families of kelps in Alaska and the Gulf of the North Pacific. And this kelp is probably the source of all of those speciated from there. The islands out in the Aleutians are isolated, you know, the island effect. It's kind of like the Galapagos, you know, so this pocket of this species has managed to persist all these years. So anyway, for phycologists and for me, this was the holy grail. And it probably will we find an undiscovered kelp that big in the world. Most all of them have been discovered. So this was kind of crazy. And I think my career peaked right there. I think it's all downhill from there. Well, I can't top that. So that's been really exciting for me. Before I go to questions, just wanted to also mention you're now all experts, but also comes with your expertise is responsibility and do's and don'ts when you're collecting seaweeds. Again, don't collect more than you need. Be smart where you collect. Don't collect by sewage drains or boat harbors. Collect the new specimens, not the old raggedy ones. That's usually in the spring when things are nice and fresh. And in general, the red algae are the best to eat. They're the most nutritious for you. And if you do collect for fertilizer in your garden, that's very popular in the coastal communities. I try and encourage people to just collect from the storm berms, the little flotsam up at the top of the beach. Mother Nature has been very nice, and she will throw that up there on the top of the beach for you to take. If you have to go down the beach and actually rip something off, you're probably not going to have that resource the following season. You know, those are perennials. Those are things that will take a while to come back, just like anything else. So they will naturally slough off in the early summer and fall storms. We'll throw it right up on the top of the beach for you. So that's what I recommend. Okay, so that is the end of my talk. And I'm going to move this I can see all of you folks.
Is all seaweed edible? That's my question.
I get that question a lot. And I always say pretty much 99.9% of it is all edible, but it's not all palatable or enjoyable. You're not going to die from eating it, but you know, if it's tough and gnarly, that's not going to be fun, and those tend to not have as many nutrients. So again, you know, we can't. Many years ago off the Kenai Peninsula, we ran into these park rangers who had gotten forgotten and had bears rip through their whole camp, and they had no food left, and they had been subsisting. And the guy came up to me and he was like, "Look what I've been eating and surviving on," and it was this fucus, the rockweed, which I was just like, of all the things you chose to eat, why was it that one? That one is very tough, not very good tasting, not a pleasant experience to eat. So I really recommend the tender things, the small things, the blades, the reds. Those are going to be your best bet.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Is there a special kind of paper that you use for wet mounding the seaweed?
Yes. Especially if you want the specimen to last a long time. I use 100% rag cotton, and buy it from herbarium suppliers. There's one in Oregon, I believe, that's pretty good, and that's usually always acid-free. You want the acid-free so it doesn't hurt the specimen over the long term. But I do tell people, if you can't get that, go into the local art supply store and get some of their watercolor paper. And watercolor paper comes in a lot of different textures. I recommend, a medium texture, not anything that's, really coarse. But, just try out different things. And it just needs to be able to handle being submerged in the water for a little while. 5 minutes, and if it's starting to disintegrate on you, that's not going to be the right kind of paper. But watercolor paper tends to handle it very well. Any other questions?
Do you Do you see commercial potential for dragon kelp?
Well, I don't know that it could, I mean, there could be, but it's a little more sensitive. You could wipe it out because it's more of an annual. The perennials can handle that. The giant kelp that I mentioned that is on the outside coast and very common in California, that is a perennial. And so they actually harvest it down in California as a commercial, but what they do is they just mow the top off, and then it just keeps growing back, just like your lawn. The dragon kelp can't really do that, and so you end up taking the whole plant and wiping out the bed. So that's just part of its life history. But it grows in places that none of those other canopy-forming ones can, so out-migration of salmon and forage fish, sand lance, herring, they all utilize that as corridors because you've got that structure, the canopy for protection and food that you don't have. So if it went away, there'd be a lot of loss of habitat for a lot of those other organisms.
Have you eaten a lot of these seaweeds?
I have, but I've turned it sort of into one of those snobs. When you always have seaweed around, you get picky. And so I like it just fresh, and whenever I go to the beach, I just graze a little as I go. I don't harvest. I don't put it up and put it away. A lot of the subsistence folks love it, and the black seaweed is what they call it. And they'll take that porphyra and ball it up and season it and stuff. And it's, very common practice. But since it's always there, I just get lazy and I just like having it fresh because that's the way I like it, just like fish, fresh. So, but it's very good to dry and it's very good to put up. So I just, get too busy. Anyone else there? Craig? Okay. Well, thank you for coming and showing up, everybody. It's the first time I've done the video conference, so, let me know if I was going too fast or something.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thanks a lot for putting it on.